Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Government overreach, woke politics, socialist rule. Well, that's how former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley describes the Biden administration.
Haley also warns about the dangerous ideological shift erupting in America. So what does she say is the solution to these threats? Here's Chief Political Analyst David Brody with this exclusive CBN News interview.
To millions of Americans, the United States is becoming unrecognizable. From what's being taught in the classroom to transgender bathroom policies to vaccine mandates, there's a noticeable ideological shift. Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley tells CBN News it's all a threat to our freedom.
I think they're trying to change the foundation of our government. I think this is creating socialist rule and government overreach. That's what they're trying to do. They want government to tell your kids what they're going to learn. They want government to tell you whether you work or whether you don't. And that's not what we want. That's communist China.
That philosophy bit Democrats in the form of Tuesday's election results in places like Virginia and New Jersey, where voters, especially parents, sent a strong message.
This is not so much what Glenn Youngkin did as what the parents of Virginia did. They said enough is enough, and Glenn tapped into that because they are absolutely tired of the racist politics. They're tired of the woke conversations that are taking place.
That's why Haley spends a lot of time fundraising to help get more candidates like Youngkin elected, especially in next year's midterms.
You're going to see a wave into 22 where people are saying this is not what we said we were in for. And I think we're going to take the country back.
So you believe that the Republicans will win the House in 2022 as we move forward here?
I think we're looking at the Senate too.
But what kind of party will the GOP be? Most polling shows it's still Trump's party. While Haley has called out the former president about events surrounding January 6th, in our interview, she was complimentary, yet forthright.
I had a great working relationship with the president. I supported every policy that he stood for. I think they were the right ones, and we need to double down on it. But I call it like I see it.
Like on January 6th,
when I don't agree with something, I'm going to say it. I don't agree with my husband 100% of the time. I'm not going to agree with somebody else 100% of the time. He's still a friend. He's still someone that I think was a good president.
What if he runs in 2024? How do you feel about that?
I mean, I've said that, if he runs in 2024, I'm not going to run.
While the media chastises Trump over his style, Haley sees it differently. She says it's actually Biden that the country should be concerned about, especially from a mental health perspective.
He keeps giving signals that he's not with it. Yeah. So it's not people hating on Biden. It's Biden really showing the country that he's not totally in charge, and that makes everyone nervous.
She would like to see situations like this addressed head on.
We seriously need to have a conversation that if you're going to have anyone above a certain age in a position of power, whether it's the House, whether it's the Senate, whether it's vice president, whether it's president, you should have some sort of cognitive test. Just like you have to show your tax returns, you should have some sort of health screening so that people have faith in what you're doing. And right now, let's face it, we've got a lot of people in leadership positions that are old. And that's not being disrespectful.
Sure.
That's a fact.
Ultimately, Haley believes it won't be Biden, Trump, or any other politician saving the day in America.
What spiritually needs to happen in this country? Because there's so many people that are despondent. They're frustrated.
To me, sometimes you have to hit rock bottom to know where up is. We have to start looking up. And then we have to start being part of the solution. And that's the way I look at it is, sometimes God sends us these little messages. We have to be smart enough to respond to it.
It's a message Haley plans to keep spreading as she fights to stop what she sees as a frightening march towards socialism. David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Well, I want to have a little bit of time to talk about this race narrative, and I certainly recognize I'm an old white man, so what am I going to say about the race narrative? So I'm going to quote Winsome Sears. She just won election as the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. She is a Black American woman. She is a woman of color. She's also a Republican. She's also a Regent University graduate. And here's what she says. I'm destroying all of the narratives about race. Look at me. I am a heartbeat away from the governorship in case anything happens to the governor. And how are you going to tell me then I'm a victim? I didn't do anything special to get here except stay in school and study. I took advantage of the opportunities that are available here in America. When we look at conservative women of color, Nikki Haley is one of them. Most people don't even consider her that way. When we look at how successful they are as conservatives, it seems to get no play at all in the media. Let's recognize, let's destroy this narrative of race. Let's destroy the politics that wants to divide us on racial grounds, and let's come together. The more we're divided, we have to look at the Bible. A house divided cannot stand. The current division, the current hate that is being promulgated, dividing one race against another for political advantage, it needs to stop. We need to all look at each other and say, how can we form a more perfect union? I've traveled the world. Racism is around the world. You can see it. If you want to see racism, go to China. If you want to see racism, go to India, where the whole caste system is based on the color of your skin. That's what caste means. Varna in Sanskrit means color. It's based on the color of your skin. We've got the best thing going here. We're not perfect. We have a long way to go. But at the same time, we have the best thing going. Let's take advantage of it. Let's work together to build a better America. Well, in other news, House Republicans are going on the offense after yesterday's stunning GOP victory in Virginia and strong showing in New Jersey. John Jessup has more from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. The GOP is now targeting 70 incumbent House Democrats for 2022, and they're also hoping to delay or stop President Biden's spending bill, arguing that the public rejects a progressive agenda.
Today is a wake-up call for Washington Democrats to abandon the partisanship, the extremist agenda of Washington-based programs that cost trillions of dollars.
The president and his allies insist the election results were a mandate for action on their big spending programs. Centrist Democrat Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, who has slowed negotiations on the massive $1.75 trillion bill, takes the opposite view. He believes voters are concerned about growing deficits and higher taxes.
We're talking about revamping the whole entire tax code. That's mammoth. Totally. We've had no hearings, no open hearings. You haven't been able to sit and listen to a hearing. None of us have. And the people definitely don't, and they're scared to death.
Manchin is pressing for a vote on the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that's been held up as Democrats debate their social spending plan. Well, Christians worldwide will observe the International Day of Prayer for the Persecuted Church this Sunday. And as Charlene Aaron shows us, global persecution is on the rise.
Each November, the call goes out around the globe for Christians to come together and pray for the persecuted church. Event organizers say this year, intercession is needed more than ever, as more than 300 million believers are experiencing attacks on an extreme level.
Over 340 million Christians are persecuted or oppressed because of their faith in Jesus. Now, some of those places, like North Korea, are exceptionally difficult. If you're caught with the Bible or whatever, you may spend the rest of your life in prison or even lose your life.
David Curry of Open Doors USA told CBN's The Prayer Link that due to the recent U.S. military withdrawal, Afghanistan is one of the most dangerous places to be a Christian.
That country is now controlled by the Taliban, and a Taliban that has morphed. It's Taliban 2.0. It has ISIS members and other kinds of extremists latching onto it. So we need to pray for people in Afghanistan who are followers of Jesus. It's a secret church.
I want to share those stories with you.
The group recently produced a documentary series on the persecuted church called Unshakable Faith, including true stories of hope in the face of desperation.
We go into these places to stand with persecuted believers. We have teams all over the world, and our job is to advocate for the persecuted, to help them, get them resources. We don't just airlift it in. We're gonna deliver things to them and prayer and stand with them.
The Voice of the Martyrs also encouraging churches to join in this special effort. Author and radio host Todd Nettleton recently told CBN's Gary Lane how Christians should pray for the persecuted church.
I think it's easy to pray for it to stop, but that's not their prayer. Their prayer is, Lord, help us to be faithful in spite of the suffering, in spite of the persecution. So I think that's an important thing for us to pray with them, that God will encourage them and allow them to remain faithful.
VOM is set to premiere the film Sabina, Tortured for Christ, the Nazi Years.
Who's this? She is my niece, Sabina Oster.
It details the powerful true story of how the organization's founders, Richard and Sabina Wurmbrandt, became followers of Christ, then experienced extreme suffering as a result of their faith and the forgiveness they displayed.
It is one of the most amazing displays of the gospel, and we still see this today in hostile and restricted nations where our persecuted brothers and sisters are able to forgive their persecutors. They're able to love their persecutors. And it is such a display, it is such a proof of the reality of the gospel that we often see persecutors impacted and even come to follow Christ through that testimony and through that example.
Meanwhile, Curry points out a special benefit felt by those who pray for these persecuted brothers and sisters.
I think it's the way that God refreshes our heart. It doesn't just burden us with a problem, but it allows us to participate in the answer because it's a spiritual battle.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
The International Day of Prayer is Sunday, November 7th. The film Sabina, Tortured for Christ is in select theaters November 8th. To find out where you can see the film in your area, just go to cbnnews.com. Gordon, that distinction of not asking for prayer, persecution to stop, but asking for God to help them to be faithful, it's just so on point.
It is, and it reminds me of a conversation I had with house church leaders in China. It was way back in the 1990s, and I was just so gripped with prayer. I wanted to pray for them, that Jesus would be with them, that his presence would be with them. They were facing persecution. They were facing imprisonment for preaching the gospel, for carrying Bibles to Western China. One of the women who was a pastor there, I was praying with her and several other pastors at the same time. She got arrested within a week. Spent the next 3.5 years in prison. But it was curious how they responded to me. They said, oh, please don't pray for us. We're good. We know Jesus is with us. We know he's called us to us. We're ready to pay the price. What we want to do is pray for the Christians in America, that the cares and concerns of this world would not overwhelm them and choke out the word to make it unfruitful. They were concerned about America. Would America stay strong in the middle of prosperity, in the middle of our freedom? Or we let that freedom be an excuse somehow to engage in things that we know are not part of the gospel of Jesus Christ? Well, that's a great prayer too. So this Sunday, let's all join together to pray for the persecuted church, and then also join with them in their prayers for us, that the cares and concerns of this world would not choke out the word and make it unprofitable.